In just a few hours of brutal fighting, over 100 heavy armored vehicles from Russia got shredded or left behind in Ukraine's deadly minefields. In November 2025 alone, they've suffered 46,000 troop casualties and over $3 billion in gear gone. Imagine that scale of destruction. A huge column of Russian tanks and APCs rolled in. It matched the size of nearly 2 brigades. They charged to break through Ukrainian lines, but they slammed into a battlefield grinder. Thick minefields tripped them up first. Then precise artillery rained down, and swarms of FPV drones hunted them like predators. The result shocked everyone. Tanks hit mines and exploded. A PCS burst into flames. Infantry jumped out and dove into enemy trenches. The whole advance stopped dead in its tracks right from the start. This battle tests more than just machines. It could get even fiercer. If Russia pulls back now, they lose a key strategic chance to push forward. If Ukraine slips up, their edge with drones and mines crumbles fast. What broke the Russian army? Once seen as masters of armored breakthroughs, right in the middle of their charge? And could this new style of fighting rewrite the rules for the entire defense industry worldwide? Stick around to find out how cheap drones are flipping the script on million-dollar tanks. Russian scouts rolled out in a pack of tanks and armored carriers to test Ukraine's front line near Pokrovsk. Thick fog hung low over the muddy fields that morning in mid-November, giving the lead carrier a slim edge as it pushed past the outer defenses without a scratch. Crews inside gripped their controls tight, scanning for any sign of trouble while the heavy rumble of tracks echoed through the mist. But the tank trailing close behind hit a hidden mine with a deafening blast that sent flames shooting sky high. Shrapnel flew in all directions, and black smoke billowed up to choke the air around the wrecked hull. The explosion turned the quiet probe into instant bedlam, with drivers slamming brakes and gunners twisting turrets in wild panic. Troops from the carrier bailed out fast, boots hitting the dirt as they dashed for cover in nearby trenches dug deep into the earth. Bullets zipped overhead from Ukrainian spotters who had eyes on the chaos through thermal sights, forcing the Russians to dive low and hug the ground to dodge the incoming fire. Radios crackled with urgent calls for backup, but the men knew drones lurked above, ready to dive on anything that moved too slow. They scrambled over barbed wire and into the damp foxholes, hearts pounding from the close call, while the carrier sat exposed like a sitting duck in the open ground. Artillery crews on the Ukrainian side locked in on the road right away, shells whistling through the fog to pound the path the scouts had just cleared. The barrage pinned down the vehicles one by one, with blasts ripping into engines and treads that ground to a halt under the weight of shrapnel. Commanders barked orders to hold position, but the fog that helped the initial push now trapped them in a deadly pocket where every shadow hid a threat. Ukrainian gunners adjusted fire on the fly, using spotter reports to walk the impacts closer to the huddled infantry. The scout force ground to a full stop as more rounds slammed home, leaving crews trapped in their steel boxes with no way forward. Flames licked at fuel leaks from the first hit tank, spreading to nearby carriers that belched oily smoke into the damp air. Drivers tried reverse gears in vain, wheels spinning uselessly in the churned mud while loaders inside fumbled for escape hatches. The minefield stretched out like an invisible wall, dotted with pressure plates that waited for the slightest touch to unleash hell. Russian engineers radioed warnings about the traps, but with the path blocked and fire raining down, options ran thin fast. Dozens of machines sat wrecked or ditched by the roadside, their crews spilling out to join the trench fight or fade back into the woods under cover of the haze. Ukrainian forward observers marked each one with laser pointers for follow-up strikes, ensuring nothing rolled away intact. The once bold push had crumbled into a scattered mess of burning hulks and desperate foot soldiers. with the fog lifting just enough to reveal the full cost of the gamble. Tanks that cost fortunes lay gutted and useless. Treads snapped like broken bones across the scarred earth. This opening salvo set the tone for the day's grind, where every yard gained came at a brutal price in iron and blood. Ukrainian defenders held their breath in the trenches. Rifles trained on the approaches as echoes of the barrage faded into tense silence. Ukrainian commanders wasted no time and pushed Bradley fighting vehicles straight into the hottest part of the line. Engines roared as the American-built machines rolled through the mud, turrets already spinning toward the Russian infantry who had jumped into the trenches minutes earlier. Soldiers inside the Bradleys kept low, while the drivers picked narrow paths between shell craters, and the 25mm chain guns opened up with long, angry bursts that cut through the smoke like chainsaws. Every time a Russian soldier tried to lift his head or pop an RPG over the trench lip, tracers slapped the dirt around him and forced him back down. The heavy thump of the cannon echoed across the flat ground, giving the Ukrainian defenders a chance to breathe and reload. Inside the trenches, the Bradley crews worked like clockwork. One vehicle sat hull down behind a low rise and poured steady fire over the open ground, while another pushed closer to drop fresh troops right at the edge of the fighting. The big rear doors dropped with a clang, and replacement riflemen sprinted out under the cover of that roaring 25mm, boots splashing through ankle-deep water as they slid into the firing positions. The cannon never stopped. It shredded tree lines where Russian spotters tried to hide and turned small groups of advancing infantry into running targets. That single gun on each Bradley became a moving wall of lead, holding the entire trench line together when everything else felt ready to break. High above the smoke, a small Ukrainian reconnaissance drone climbed through the gray sky and looked far beyond the burning scouts. Its camera zoomed in on a much larger column kicking up dust several kilometers back. Dozens of fresh tanks and carriers rolled in tight formation, crews confident they could punch through the chaos ahead. The drone operator marked the exact grid square, typed a short message, and hit send. Within seconds, the coordinates flashed across screens in a hidden artillery battery miles away. Gunners spun their tubes, loaded long shells packed with cluster bomblets, and fired a full salvo that arced high over the battlefield. Those shells burst open in the air and rained hundreds of small explosives across the road the second wave planned to use. Some bomblets scattered anti-tank mines that clicked into active mode the moment they hit the ground, turning the entire approach into a fresh death trap. Others detonated on impact and shredded tires and tracks on the lead vehicles. The column braked hard, metal grinding against metal as drivers tried to spread out, yet every turn risked rolling over a new mine. Engines revved uselessly while commanders screamed over the radio for new routes that simply did not exist. The artillery fire walked back and forth across the killing ground, guided by the calm voice of the drone pilot who watched everything from a safe bunker. This tight dance between ground troops, Bradleys, drones, and distant guns now runs almost every major fight on this front. One Bradley holds the line long enough for the drone to find the next threat, and the guns drop steel before the enemy even knows he has been seen. The Russians learned that morning that pushing armor forward without total control of the sky above and the ground below is no longer an option. Russian armor kept coming anyway, wave after wave of tanks and carriers charging straight into the teeth of the defense. Drivers gambled that speed would carry them through the minefield, so they shoved lighter APCs ahead to clear a path instead of waiting for proper engineering vehicles. The gamble failed fast. One carrier after another rolled over hidden charges and jumped into the air with orange fireballs that swallowed the whole hull. Tracks blew apart and engines died in seconds, leaving the road clogged with smoking wrecks that blocked everything behind them. Crews inside the stalled machines popped hatches and climbed out coughing, eyes wide as they realized the next mine could be under their feet. Ukrainian drone teams launched their FPV swarm the moment the column froze. Small quadcopters loaded with shaped charges streaked low over the trees and dove onto the trapped vehicles like hornets. Operators sitting miles away guided each one with calm precision, steering for the thin roof armor above the turret or the soft side panels near the fuel tanks. Explosions ripped open steel plates and sent turret baskets spinning away in flames. Ammunition cooked off inside some hulls and turned the tanks into giant torches that lit the whole battlefield red. One T-90 lost its turret completely when a drone slipped right into the open commander hatch and blew the whole top clean off. Burning vehicles lined the narrow road like broken toys, and Russian infantry had no choice but to scatter. Some sprinted for the tree line on the left, boots pounding through knee-high grass, while others bolted right toward ruined farm buildings and deep cellars. A few tried to drag wounded buddies with them, arms hooked under shoulders as they stumbled over fresh craters. The lucky ones made it to cover and slammed doors behind them, chests heaving as they listened for the telltale buzz overhead. That buzz never stopped. FPV pilots hunted every runner with cold patience. One drone chased a soldier across an open field for almost 30 seconds, matching every zigzag until the man tripped and froze. The camera feed showed him raise his hands just before the screen went white. Another pilot flew straight through a shattered window into a basement where 4 Russians crouched with rifles ready. The explosion collapsed the ceiling and buried the room in dust and screams. Upstairs, a second drone hovered outside a second-story window and waited for a helmet to appear before it punched through the glass and ended the fight inside. In the end, only one Russian soldier remained on the open ground. He had run farther than the rest, legs burning and rifle long gone. The drone circled above him like a hawk. Camera locked on his face as he dropped to his knees and lifted both arms high. Ukrainian infantry moved in slowly under the drone's watchful eye, weapons up but fingers off triggers. They cuffed the exhausted man and led him away while the little quadcopter climbed back into the sky to look for the next target. The road stayed jammed with burning steel and scattered gear, a graveyard of machines that Russian thoughts would help them win the game. Ukrainian drone teams shifted their attention deeper behind Russian lines once the main armor push stalled in flames. Small FPV units peeled away from the burning road and raced toward the supply trails that fed the attack. Operators spotted fast-moving quad bikes loaded with ammo boxes weaving along dirt tracks, and one after another the bikes flipped end over end when shaped charges punched through the riders and turned fuel tanks into fireballs. Trucks followed the same fate. A heavy Ural packed with artillery shells tried to speed past a tree line, but a drone slipped under the canvas cover and detonated right on the cargo bed. The blast lit the forest orange and sent crates of 152mm rounds tumbling across the ground like toys. Farther back, a Russian unmanned ground vehicle crawled out of the woods on rubber tracks, its flatbed stacked high with mortar bombs and rockets. The machine moved slow and steady, guided by an operator miles away who thought the trees would hide it. A Ukrainian FPV pilot spotted the heat signature and dove straight down the trail. The drone struck the front chassis and blew the entire load sky high. Secondary explosions rippled for almost 10 seconds as bombs cooked off one by one, leaving a crater big enough to swallow a car and scattering burning fragments across the underbrush. The unmanned carrier sat twisted and silent. Its mission ended before it reached the guns that were already starving for shells. Not far away, Ukraine's own robot joined the fight. A remote-controlled platform on wheels rolled forward under drone guidance, its twin machine guns already rattling. The overhead UAV painted a laser dot on a clump of trees where Russian troops tried to regroup, and the ground robot opened up with long bursts that chewed through branches and pinned the men in place. Dirt kicked up around their boots while tracers stitched red lines across the leaves. The robot advanced step by step, reloading from internal belts without ever exposing a human driver. Russian soldiers fired back with rifles and a few grenades. Yet the armored buggy kept coming until the position fell quiet. With the forward armor stuck and burning, every lost truck and bike cut the lifeline that kept the assault alive. Frontline crews shouted over radios for more shells and fuel, but the replies came back empty. Gunners watched their ready racks go dry, while wounded vehicles sat helpless without spare parts or evac teams. Commanders tried to reroute fresh convoys, only to see them light up on screens as new drones found the detour roads just as fast. The whole attack began to choke on its own broken supply chain. Russian troops remaining after the initial engagements now faced prolonged losses. Infantry established defensive positions around damaged vehicles and awaited reinforcements that did not come. Medical personnel operated with limited supplies, and vehicle crews hided beside equipment that could not be repaired. The battlefield stretched quiet except for the occasional pop of a distant explosion where another drone found another soft target. Ukraine's cheap robots had reached far behind the spearhead and sliced the arteries that fed the fight. The big push lost its breath, and everyone on the Russian side felt the cold truth settle in. Ukrainian Leopard tanks and artillery units kept up their relentless pressure on the few Russian vehicles that dodged the initial carnage. Tracks ground against gravel as surviving drivers veered off the main path and hunted for gaps in the minefield. Leopard crews perched in hull-down positions miles back and adjusted their long barrels with slow care, sending high-explosive rounds that whistled through the afternoon haze. Each hit shook the earth and flipped carriers onto their sides, exposing underbellies to follow-up shots. Russian navigators cursed over open channels while trying to plot safe routes through the grass. Yet every detour led straight into fresh traps or open sights of the big guns. One Russian armored carrier took a direct strike from a Leopard shell and erupted in a column of fire that blocked the narrow bypass like a barricade. The hull twisted under the heat and settled across the trail, tires melting into the dirt while oily smoke poured from the engine bay. Vehicles stacked up behind it in a desperate jam, engines idling as crews peered out hatches for any way around. The blockage turned the whole group into a perfect target, with no room to spread out or reverse without rolling over hidden charges. Ukrainian spotters relayed the scene back to their batteries, and shells soon fell like rain on the clustered machines. Any machine that paused even for a moment drew immediate fire from both guns and drones. A tank crew tried to shove the burning wreck aside with their dozer blade, but an FPV unit zipped in low and struck the exposed fuel line. The explosion chained to the next carrier in line and lit up the sky with fresh blasts. Russian mechanics jumped out to fix treads under fire, tools clanging against metal while rounds chipped paint around them. The drones circled like vultures and picked off the slow movers one by one, forcing everyone to abandon their rides and run on foot. Pressure built hard on the Ukrainian trench line as Russian survivors closed in with grenades and machine gun bursts. A Bradley vehicle charged back through the storm of bullets, its 25mm cannon barking to clear a path as it skidded to a stop at the trench edge. The Bradley crew dropped the rear ramp with a heavy thud and waved the troops aboard under a hail of incoming rounds. Medics hauled the injured man inside first, strapping him to a stretcher, while others climbed up and slammed the doors shut. The machine lurched backward with tires spinning in the slop, turrets swiveling to lay down suppressive fire that kept heads down across the field. Ukrainian fighters inside caught their breath and checked weapons, grateful for the thick armor that shrugged off small arms hits. The vehicle vanished into the smoke and carried everyone to safety, leaving the trench empty except for spent casings and boot prints. Russia called off the breakthrough attempt at last, despite committing forces the size of 2 full brigades. Command tents buzzed with frustration as officers stared at maps dotted with red loss markers. The day ended with quiet radio silence from the front, broken only by distant rumbles of cleanup fire. Ukrainian lines held firm, and the field stayed littered with twisted steel that no one dared approach until night fell. This battle shows more than just a Russian defeat. It highlights how modern warfare is changing. Drones that cost only a few hundred to a few $1,000s were able to destroy tanks and armored vehicles worth millions. Cheap, smart, and flexible defensive systems proved more effective than traditional heavy armor. The battlefield is no longer about just size and firepower. Speed, coordination, and real-time control of drones, artillery, and infantry can stop even the largest armored columns. Russian forces found that out the hard way. Vehicles were destroyed, supply lines cut, and soldiers were forced to retreat under constant drone and artillery attacks. This raises big questions for the future. Do tanks still have a place on the battlefield, or are they becoming relics of an older era? More importantly, which countries will adapt fastest to robotic and drone warfare? The ones that do may hold the advantage in conflicts to come. If this analysis shocked or surprised you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more insights into modern combat. The rules of war are changing, and what happens next could redefine the future of battle.